All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking all about maintenance workers.
Oh, yeah, really interesting field.
It is. Whether you're thinking about, going for a job in this area or just want to know more about what they do, this is the place to be.
Absolutely.
We are going to be looking at maintenance worker interview questions, Joy N, for this one.
Okay.
So this is, it's designed to help businesses find the right people.
Mm.
So it's really cool to get this kind of behind the scenes look at what employers are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, get that inside scoop.
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the things that I noticed right away going through these interview questions was just how much emphasis there is on problem solving.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, it's not just about being quick on your feet, though. It's more about this, like, really analytical way of thinking that they need.
Oh, interesting. So what do you mean by that?
Well, think about a maintenance worker, right? Mm-hmm. They're kind of like detectives in a way. They walk into a situation, maybe a machine's broken down, and they need to gather clues.
Okay, yeah.
What's the error message saying? What kind of sounds is it making? What was the last thing that happened before it stopped working? This is where that inductive reasoning comes in.
So they're using those specific clues to try and figure out the bigger problem.
Exactly. And then they
Okay.
start, ruling things out, testing out different theories, maybe even looking at flowcharts or manuals. It's a very systematic way of breaking down a problem that seems really complicated into these smaller steps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're not just going to, randomly start replacing parts, right? You
Yeah.
really have to have that methodical approach.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that they ask in this material is, tell me about a time when you didn't know how to fix something. What did you do? Why do you think that's such an important question? That's a good one. Well, even if you're the most experienced maintenance worker, eventually you're going to run into a problem you've never seen before.
Yeah, right.
So it's not about knowing every single answer. It's more about showing how you approach the unknown. Do you freak out?
Right.
Or do you stay calm, look at your resources, maybe ask a colleague for help, and ultimately find a solution?
Yeah.
That's the kind of mindset that employers really want to see.
Yeah, like a detective and a scientist all rolled into one. Okay, so we've got the problem-solving side of things.
Hmm?
But this source also talks about being comfortable using lots of different tools and equipment.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Got to know your way around a toolbox. That's a given.
Yeah.
But the specific skills, they can really change depending on what kind of industry you're in.
Mhm.
This source specifically mentions HVAC as a key area.
HVAC, right? Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It's pretty specialized, right?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of technical stuff would a maintenance worker need to know for that? Well, first off, you got to know about all the different kinds of HVAC systems. You've got your split systems, packaged units, heat pumps. They all have their own little quirks and parts. And then there's refrigerant. Knowing the difference between an R22 system and an R410A system is super important for troubleshooting.
I bet there's a ton of electrical stuff involved too.
Right, yeah, for sure. You're dealing with high voltage, complex wiring diagrams, all kinds of safety protocols. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, definitely not.
And that actually brings us to another super important thing they highlight in here, safety. Being super aware of safety.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're often working in some pretty risky environments. Big, powerful machines, maybe even hazardous materials.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when it comes to safety, you can't mess around. One little mistake can have some seriously bad consequences.
Right, of course.
In fact, they even include a question specifically about that. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a safety risk at work. How did you handle it?
So they're really trying to understand how aware you are and how committed you are to doing things by the book.
Exactly. And it's not just about knowing the rules, it's being able to actually use them in real-life situations.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for example, LOTO procedures.
L-O-T-O.
Yeah, lockout, takeout. It's basically a way to make sure that a machine is totally shut off and can't be accidentally turned back on before you start working on it.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely essential to prevent injuries. And any potential employer is going to want to know if you've used these procedures before.
It sounds like being a maintenance worker is a whole lot more than just fixing stuff. It's about critical thinking, understanding these really complex systems, and always putting safety first.
It definitely is. But there's even more to it than that. We haven't even touched on communication and organization skills yet.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're not just working alone in a bubble, right? You're talking to people in different departments all the time. But before we get into that, maybe we should pause for a sec. We've covered a ton of info, and I want to make sure our listeners have a chance to absorb it all.
Good idea. Let's take a moment to think about what we've learned so far and then we'll get back to those all-important communication and organization skills.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I think we've given our listeners a good grasp of the technical skills and problem solving that a maintenance worker needs.
Yeah, for sure. It's like being a detective A&D, a scientist, with a huge emphasis on safety.
Now imagine that our maintenance worker, our detective, they've cracked the case. They know why that HVAC system is blowing cold air instead of hot. They've figured out how to fix it, but now they got to explain that to somebody who doesn't know anything about refrigerant or wiring diagrams. That's where communication comes in.
Ah, yeah, because they're often working with people who don't have that technical background, right?
Right. They might need to explain the problem and the solution to a supervisor, a building manager, maybe even the tenant who's freezing in their apartment. Being able to take complex technical stuff and break it down into simple language is super valuable.
It's like they're translating between the world of machines and the world of people.
Exactly. And it's not just explaining stuff clearly, it's also listening carefully to understand what other people are concerned about. A tenant might not just be reporting a problem, they might be worried about how much it's going to cost to fix it or how long it'll disrupt their life.
So there's a bit of empathy involved, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A good maintenance worker knows how to build that trust and rapport. It makes things a lot smoother for everybody. Now, this source also talks about organization skills.
Oh, yeah, I can see why that would be important, especially if you're in a really busy environment, juggling all kinds of tasks.
Totally. Think about it. You might be responsible for doing routine maintenance on a bunch of different systems, handling emergency repairs, managing inventory, keeping records, and maybe even working with outside contractors.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's actually a question here about that.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize your tasks, for example, if two machines break down at the same time?
Hmm.
I bet that kind of situation could get pretty stressful.
It definitely can. That's why being able to prioritize effectively is so key. You got to quickly figure out which tasks are the most urgent and have the biggest impact. Then decide where to focus your time and energy. Maybe one machine is critical for the whole building to function, while the other can wait a few hours.
So you have to be able to think on your feet, analyze the situation, and make tough decisions under pressure.
Exactly. And that's where strong organizational skills come in handy. Having a system for keeping track of your tasks, deadlines, and inventory can make a world of difference.
It's like having a mental map of everything that's going on so you can stay on top of it all and not get overwhelmed.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings up something that I think is so important but often gets overlooked: the need for continuous learning in this field.
Oh, interesting. Why is learning so crucial for maintenance workers?
Well, think about how technology is constantly changing. Years ago, a maintenance worker might have spent most of their time fixing mechanical stuff, wrenches and screwdrivers. Now you've got computerized control panels, sensor networks, all this automated stuff. It's a whole new ballgame.
So you have to be willing to adapt and keep learning about all these new technologies.
Right. A really good maintenance worker is a lifelong learner. Somebody who's always curious about how things work and willing to put in the time to learn new skills. That might mean taking some online courses, going to industry conferences, or even just reading articles and staying up to date.
Sounds like the learning never really stops.
It doesn't. But that's also what makes it so exciting. You're always being challenged, learning new things, and growing your skill set. It keeps you on your toes.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Problem solving, technical know-how, safety, communication, organization, and this idea of never stopping learning. Anything else we should touch on before we wrap up?
You know what? There is one more thing. Remember how we talked about these interview questions being like a peek into what hiring managers are looking for?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what makes a truly great candidate.
Well, how about we flip the script? If you were interviewing someone for a maintenance worker job, what one question would you ask to really get a sense of their potential?
That's a tough one. I think I'd actually go beyond the technical stuff and experience and ask something about their mindset. Something like, tell me about a time you faced a really difficult problem, something that really pushed you to your limits. What was your thought process as you worked through it?
I like that. You're not looking for a specific right answer. You're trying to see how they handle tough situations, how they think critically, how they stay resilient when things get tough.
Exactly. Because let's be real, in this job, you're going to run into some frustrating stuff, some real head scratchers. You need someone who can keep their cool, doesn't give up easily, and can come up with creative solutions when the obvious ones just aren't working.
That actually reminds me of this one time.
Oh, you have a story. Let's hear it.
Well, it was pretty early in my career, And I was working on this massive HVAC system that just would not cooperate. I checked everything, went through all the troubleshooting steps, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out why it wasn't cooling properly. I was starting to get really frustrated, even doubting my own skills.
Yeah, I bet that's a tough feeling. So what did you do?
I decided to step back, literally. I walked away from the system for a few minutes and just cleared my head, grabbed a cup of coffee, chatted with a coworker about something completely different, and then when I came back, I tried approaching the problem from a totally new angle.
And did that work?
It did. I realized that I had been so focused on one specific part that I had completely missed something super simple, a clogged air filter. Once we replaced that, the whole system started working perfectly.
Wow, so sometimes the simplest solution is the easiest to miss.
It really is. And it was a great reminder that sometimes you just got to take a break, come back with fresh eyes, and you'll see things you didn't before.
That's a great story, and it highlights how important it is to persevere, even when you feel like giving up.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, figuring out that problem, getting that system back online, that feeling is so rewarding.
Yeah, and I imagine that feeling of accomplishment is something maintenance workers experience all the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a career that's full of challenges, but also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's always changing, which means there's always something new to learn and explore.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything. We've talked about problem solving, the technical skills you need, the importance of safety, being a good communicator, staying organized, and even that mindset of continuous learning.
We even got a personal anecdote in there.
Exactly. I think anyone listening to this has a much better idea of what it takes to be successful in this field. But before we completely wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one last thought. So we talked about all these skills that are important, but what about the stuff you can't really teach, the things that really make someone a great maintenance worker?
Oh, yeah, those kind of intangible qualities, huh?
Yeah, exactly. What do you think those might be?
Hmm. Well, I think a big one is that genuine curiosity,
Okay.
that drive to figure out how things work. Almost like a detective, but for machines. And along with that, you got to be willing to get your hands dirty,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
not afraid of a little grease or grime. It's almost a sense of craftsmanship, I guess, taking pride in fixing things and making sure they run smoothly.
I love that. That's such a good point. I bet if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, that's me. I love tinkering and figuring things out.
Hmm.
Maybe this is their calling.
Right. Even if they've never thought about maintenance work before, even if our listeners are going to go trade their desk for a toolbox, I think there's still something here for everyone.
Oh, what do you mean?
It's about taking that same problem-solving approach, that resilience, that willingness to keep learning and adapting and using it in our own lives. Whether it's dealing with a tough project at work, fixing something at home, or just navigating this crazy world.
Yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
the next time you're feeling stuck, channel your inner maintenance worker, right?
Exactly.
Take a deep breath, look at the situation, and remember those key skills. Think critically, prioritize, stay calm, maybe even pull out a manual.
And don't be afraid to get those hands a little dirty.
Love it. That's a great takeaway. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of maintenance workers.
It's been awesome getting to explore this really important but often overlooked field.
And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those gears turning.